I want to talk about this stigmata of gaming, especially when you're getting older. As an adult, gaming has a very negative stigmata where people would be very okay when you are older, that you are reading books, that you are enjoying movies, but also it would be totally okay to doom scroll on your phone, being on your phone all of the time, watching Instagram, TikTok, or whatever it might be. But whenever a person, an adult with responsibilities, would start gaming on something like this, the ROG Xbox Ally or the Anbernic RG35XX Plus, retro games, people would be very hesitant towards that person in regards to kind of thinking that would be okay. Again, it's a stigmata. It's something where people say, oh, gaming is for children. Or you are a grown person. Why the hell are you playing video games? Games in general. Also board games. Although I feel like here in Germany, board games have a better rep. It supposedly because you get together and sit at a table and it's kind of socializing. It's deemed to be okay. But when it comes down to video games, although that's not really true because board games have somewhat of a renaissance where adults would be okay with that. Some of them at least. But it also has somewhat of a stigmata. But then there are also other games like Magic the Gathering or Dungeons and Dragons. And that has also a very negative rep, especially when you are older. And I kind of really want to oppose that stigmata and that thought process because I feel like that, especially when we are older, when we have lots of responsibilities, some of you have children and stuff, that gaming is a very important, maybe, but very effective tool for chilling out. But also, like I always say, for mental health to a degree, because diving into a story of a video game. For example, I'm playing Hogwarts Legacy. Before that, I played Final Fantasy, and then before that, Chrono Trigger. And also games like Aladdin or Wario Land and stuff like that. Because it is such an active task that people really don't consider. It has such a negative rep, but you are actively pushing buttons, you are actively following a story, you are actively solve puzzles, fight in the game, so reactive. You are very active in whatever you're doing. It's actually reading a book from an active perspective, watching a movie, but active. It is such a good tool to kind of steer your mind, whatever you have going on, in a completely different direction. Getting away from what's bothering you, what's weighing on your shoulders is so much easier to get away from than when you just watch a movie. Reading a book is a different thing. Reading a book, I feel like, is a very difficult task to multitask. For example, when you're watching a movie, there is a high likeliness that you potentially suddenly grab your phone and you start scrolling on Instagram or on TikTok. And I think it's really important to kind of realize that people who are very likely to nurture that stigmata of gaming is not for adults are very okay with spending multiple hours of their day passively consuming stupid content on TikTok or Instagram. And that is why I kind of want to talk about the stigmata, because I feel like the stigmata has to kind of quit. because if it's okay to passively doom scroll, why is it bad to actively consume a game? And again, if you have games with huge storylines, I would really argue it's like a book. Gaming can be like a book. Obviously, something like Tetris is not a book, but it engages your brain in this puzzle game. I'm not sure if Tetris is considered a puzzle game. Still, it kind of nurtures your reaction time and your fast thinking, I would argue. But if you play something like Hogwarts Legacy, it's basically an interactive book. So why is that so bad? And now there is the argument that some people might say, and this is something that probably one of your parents told you when you were a child. It's gaming is some form of escapism. You should deal with the real world and you should grow up. That is probably something some of you will have heard when you were younger and when you were playing video games. And to a degree, that is true if you utilize gaming as a form of escapism to neglect your responsibilities, to not deal with your problems, then it's a bad tool. But if you utilize it in a way that I kind of propose, so as an effective mental health tool by utilizing it to get away from whatever is weighing on your shoulder, whatever you have to do for 10 minutes, with the goal to get back to whatever was weighing on your shoulders, to get back to work, with the goal of a fresh perspective, with a clean slate, it is so effective. Because when you are able to dive into a story, into an interactive game, it is so helpful to have this fresh perspective. For example, working out I'm a martial artist practitioner. So whenever I go into sparring, you have to concentrate on whatever you are doing in that moment. And you forget everything that you had before. And you get re-energized and you can get back to the problems that you have with that fresh and re-energized perspective. And with gaming, it's somewhat similar, because if you're saying, okay, let's do a smoke break. I don't smoke. I'm a non-smoker, but that's something that people do, right? They say, okay, let's go out, 10-minute break, smoke a cigarette, or 10-minute break, and I'm scrolling on Instagram. I'm fairly certain that is not as effective. Completely disregard that smoking is bad for your health, but I would say it's not as effective, because in those 10 minutes, because you are passively scrolling on Instagram, because you're just standing there, and I'm oversimplifying here, you're standing there and smoking a cigarette, your mind can still wander back to whatever you had to do. But with a game where you have to solve puzzles, where you have to actively push buttons in a reactive way, or you are diving deep into a story like Hogwarts Legacy, it is so much easier to forget whatever you had to do. And if you remind yourself, again, this is just 10 minutes break because I want to have the goal of kind of resetting my brain and going back with a fresh perspective, then gaming, especially on handheld devices that you can kind of keep here at your work desk, or this that you can kind of bring in your pockets wherever you go, it is such an effective tool. And again, the stigma of, oh, you are an adult, you shouldn't game, is so stupid, because the older you get, the more responsibilities you have, the more gravity there is pulling on you, the more weight is on your shoulders, the more responsibilities, the more problems, the heavier it is on your shoulder, the more exhausted you get, the more negativity might accumulate in your brain. Therefore, I feel like it is so much more important to have something that is fun, like gaming, in your life. Bring it back into your life. And I know it's difficult when you have more responsibilities, but that's why I'm arguing for these handheld devices. Especially when you have instant resume, like this ROG Ally. I was always under the impression this doesn't have instant resume, but if you set it instead to sleep to hibernate, it's the same thing with the ROG, not the ROG, the Anbonic. You push switch off and you go to work and you go back to the handheld device. You can have it here on your desk. Switch it on, wait 30 seconds, and then you're back at the place where you have left off. So it is so much easier to, if you have a handheld device and not a PC or a console, where you kind of need to kind of think, is the TV, is it available? Or can I actually play on my PC while I'm working? And I would argue you cannot, because there will be still mails coming in. But having a handheld device will give you the opportunity to fit gaming into your busy life. And again, being an adult with lots of responsibilities, I think, and I believe truly that gaming is such a good, effective tool to bring some joy back into your busy schedule. I'm not saying that you have a miserable life. I'm just saying there will be periods of times in your life, in your week, in your day, where you kind of want to switch off your brain for a second. And gaming is, in my humble opinion, one of the most effective tools that you can kind of squeeze into your day-to-day. Gym is also great, but I would argue something in your brain might say, oh, I really need to do this work thing. I cannot drive to the gym for half an hour commute, work out, and then go back again, half an hour commute. That's maybe 2 hours, 1.5 hours. I cannot squeeze it in. But gaming, you will always be able to, if you have a handheld device, in my own opinion, you will be able to squeeze it in. And again, it is stupid to say that adult beings shouldn't play video games, because I truly believe it's such a helpful tool. And the older we get, it gets even more important. And this is not scientific, but I would argue if you get older, and I'm speaking here like 70, 80, kind of where your cognitive skills will degenerate, unfortunately, playing a game, solving puzzles, following a story and trying to solve the story instead of just reading, I would argue, and this is not scientific, I have no clue if that is true, but I would kind of think that because your brain is a muscle and you're doing stuff like this, could help your brain in a way. Not sure if that's true, but I would kind of assume that could be the case. So yeah, the older you get, I think, get gaming back and kind of get rid of that stigmata. And if someone tells you, hey, why the hell, you're a grown person, you're over 40, you're playing games, first and foremost, tell that person it's fun, why shouldn't I do it? And secondly, ask that person, are you on TikTok and Instagram? And that person says something along the lines, yeah, a little bit. And then ask the person, how much time do you spend on Instagram? And do you really think that is better than gaming? You're consuming passively, you're just scrolling, and there's nothing worthwhile or really teachable in there. Ask that person, is passively scrolling stupid content actually better than actively consuming a game? I would argue, or I would assume that that person probably doesn't have a good argument against that. All right, so that was my probably it wasn't short, my opinions about gaming as an adult. Let me know what are your opinions. And I love this device. I have not made a review yet about the ROG Ally, but maybe check out my first impressions video up here. YouTube thinks that you like the video down here. Don't forget to subscribe by clicking the button up here. That way we see each other in the next video. Thank you very much.